All right, everybody, welcome to the final episode of the September series of Dojo. Um, very, very excited to receive offerings of what I'm going to call energy work. And, Tal and I have talked a bunch about what is energy work. Um, Earlier today on Instagram, I called it live improv. By mistake, I meant to say live improvised astrology, as Tal had described it on Mastodon. Um, and yeah, it's a pleasure for me. Like, this is the second series, like 1 month series of dojo that I've put together, and I guess the custom at this point is that in the first episode I'll be offering to somebody, and then in the last episode somebody's offering to me, and that may not always be the case. And if it is the last time that's the case, I'm going to be very grateful that Tal said yes to coming on and doing what I'm sure is going to be some delicious and mind-bending astrology for y'all. This is the first time you're tuning into an episode of Dojo, which I'm sure it is actually, or if you're watching it recorded for the first time because we decided to put it on YouTube, I'll just say that for me, Dojo is about refining in front of other people. And I feel like the awareness of people who are not taking part in energy work just adds some juice to the capacity that can be used to harmonize, you could say, like disruptions which can come up in our regular capacity, like our regular capacity of nervous system, which maybe make it impossible for us to talk about things which otherwise could be released. And what's exorcism? I would say that there's going to be a ton of exorcism in this dojo. I would say there's a ton of exorcism in every dojo, even when nobody who is here would perhaps call themselves an exorcist. And yeah, if you're interested in dojo, I would say please let me know anywhere you find me, and I'll use my discernment about letting you join for the next series. If you want to present or offer energy work or exercise people or be exercised or receive energy work, then please let me know, because I feel pretty certain we're going to be doing this again, maybe in the December solstice time period. But yeah, I'm going to open the container officially with some light language, as I ordinarily do. And I'll say that I only allow what is for the cosmic time of each and every being in this container and every container of dojo, and in the collective beingness of the one, or Tao, or what I sometimes refer to as Shekinah, field outside of time. And I'm offering some light language on the topic of I'm just going to say willow, which I get some gnosis about, but I look forward to seeing what comes up. I'll start now. Sitete mashtokat ene kididorot iftemeniana kadopuroksa kakanek eshtef de personada de henmat dipsukata nishte parasatanan dik. Ufara nasat inishte ero kana sutinefte bidurush kada da anifte arusukana na akarit. Shit erfte pesumkatarisat neshe. Fa Niena sukuna muhoroka tasanete eretetenen sultana kadishte anefte. Ukaran saftamananda katash. Shita ansioro masukana nafte penishte. Ja. Kukana saponona tarefte bistore. Shtikana mone eretkani enishte anyama kusamatafte nepende eretek. Ki anefte bistore sift imin sandor. Takapurna shtabamti betrukate inense. Subaktiv die Melange mit einer Matte bedarf eine Stärke in der Kana soy shit inero da pasun kurate keniste etes kona ki nafte binun nashta karate korota da matela tuk ni estefte benurushta karamas temeda karame karamas da nishte keniste Bukan sistemin işte o kadar kırılmış. Da tanıtıyor işte kırılmış değil sıkkına da kadar kırılmış işte. Ha, ha. Thank you. And it was mercifully short today. So now that I've said my piece, I'm just gonna hand it over to you, Tal, and thank you again.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to do this practice in the dojo, which I've never done before. By which I mean, I've never, this container feels clear to me as a place of collaborative work in front of others for the sake of
Mm.
trust and transparency in spiritual practice. And while trust and transparency are an enormous part of my spiritual practice, the astrology is always done on my own. Something that I don't offer that seemingly everybody else does is live consultations, like face to face. I have done them before, in person and online, but it's not part of how I do this practice generally, because the kind of astrology that I do, for the most part, involves a moment of divination and sort of personal practice that I tend to do on my own time. And it's a long and like discovery oriented kind of astrology practice. And so I'm hunting around and trying lots of things, and not all of them go anywhere. And the finished product is something that's refined down pretty hard from what actually comes out over the course of my work. And that's not a good use of time for the most part, unless the purpose is to demonstrate process like this, which I am very excited to do. And also, I'm excited. I mean, I sort of feel like I'm addressing everyone right now, but like, just to turn to you specifically, Nobu, for a second, like, we've talked about this a lot. We've talked about this in a lot of ways, but I still feel like it's mysterious to you exactly what I'm doing in there. And so I'm sort of looking forward to showing you how it works. I think that there's a lot of discourse about astrology to have in general. And you yourself have partaken in some quite spicy flavors of discourse about it that I've always laughed uproariously about. But what I feel like we're going to discover here together is that the thing I'm doing is kind of unrecognizably different from what a lot of people online are doing. And I mean that in a technical astrological sense. I don't just mean that in a sort of aesthetic, or even like it's not natal astrology. I have your chart. If we need to use your chart for something and you give me permission to do so, we can. But it depends what we're doing here. So you've turned it over to me. I've given a little bit of preamble, but what we're actually going to do is I'm going to receive a question from you, which is going to require your participation, because I don't know what we're doing yet. Yeah. And this is kind of the fun part. This is the improv part, is that I have several astrological tools available to me, which we can talk about as their own things if you'd like. But what I thought we might be able to do is figure out which ones to use as we go, based on what it is you need to know.
Makes a lot.
Maybe I'll just like give a couple of examples of the kinds of things that they could be, and then that may help you sort of find a starting point in asking. But I can do astrology of questions, which would involve taking the chart for where I'm sitting right now, as soon as I have received your question, and using it to answer that question. This is what is called horary astrology, which means the astrology of the hour. And that will tell us certain kinds of things. But the event chart for this call will tell us things also, and that might be 20 or 30 minutes earlier by the time we actually get to casting a chart. And that will tell us something more about the purpose of this than about the question, outside of time. And then, of course, there is the matter of the future. And that can be addressed in all kinds of ways, including as a question. But it can be, depending on the nature of, or the amount of, let's say, depending on how personal the question is for you, that may involve transit charts to your nativity or to some event, including this call. And if it involves a matter of choice, not which choice to make, that's a horary question. But if you have a choice to make or an action to take, and you are looking for the auspicious aligned time to make that choice or to take that action, then we will require what is known as lectional astrology, which will probably require your natal chart if we're not going to do something that may have side effects. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
I love the way you put side effects. Makes it like the most exciting thing for me. Well, I'll say that I feel clear to share my natal publicly. I did a why am I like this about like why people might not want to share their natals, and I felt like in that session I cleared a lot of, like some people say, like dismembering placements, and I cleared a lot of like karma. So it's not that those things don't, I would say they can't be used to attack me anymore. It's not to say that they don't have any bearing on things, because my body has been growing from the time, right?
Yes.
But I would say that like I don't experience stuckness to them, which when it comes to being attacked, I would say is it makes one more difficult to attack. We're in the dojo, so we're just talking in very emotional terms right now.
Yeah.
And then I'll say that so many things came up for me from the get-go, like from, you were the first person to agree to doing one of these sessions. And at that point, I was already like, whoa, because, I think this about me, and probably a lot of people know this about me. Like, I just kind of like use my body and I move. And sometimes my head mind has no fucking idea what's going on. And sometimes that's for the best, also related to avoiding attacks, I would say. But, I'll say that last week I was asking you like, ooh, like what if I wanted to figure out if I should stay in Australia or go to Bulgaria? And then like stuff shifted. And then I would say that the overall kind of idea of trying to figure out like what's the interaction between the stars and then things like legal systems of immigration, particularly, let's say, and would that make any of these questions less answerable? And then I'd say another thing that came up, which feels like an electional thing, is like you and I have talked about this thing that I kind of enigmatically call 333 as a kind of, I've used the word shul as like a place to do, I want to say like rigorous business and science with regard to like metaphysical fields. And then I think the first thing which came up for me was like, okay, what are my wife and I going to do with this house that we have sort of inherited by verbal agreement from my father-in-law in Sofia? And that kind of came up too. But I feel like that's also subject to a ton of logistical stuckness, I'm going to say. But I feel like, yeah, like what's kind of coming up for me right now is what would be a good time to create a vote in the broom to birth a new lineage space relating to 333. And its name might be different, but I don't think that changes too much from the astrological perspective, right?
Probably not. Although what planet signifies it may have something to tell us about it, for sure.
Well, I'm down to get into that for sure.
Okay. So that sounds like an electional question.
Yeah.
So let me see if I got that. If so, so you're asking about when to. I'm typing as I talk, so forgive me if my mouth stops working. When to initiate a vote
Yeah.
is what we're electing,
Yeah.
and the vote is for creating a new
A
lineage
kind of
space, like a
new
channel.
space, yeah. A new
Um,
way.
mhm. So this is the vote is for whether or not to do so. We're not deciding whether or not this will be created.
Yeah, it's definitely going to happen. It's about the time, I guess.
Okay.
The
Well,
date
the
is
vote.
gone.
Help me understand what we're voting on.
Well, the vote, like, so at the time that this is a great question. It allows me to talk about this. Um, I would say that by the time the vote happens, I will have formulated like a so-called one pager about what people are voting for. And
Mhm.
that's going to be like a proposal about what this new lineage is going to be called. I would say a description of what people are going to be talking about in this lineage. And probably some form of like meeting structure or session
Mhm.
structure. And then, in the broom, we have a channel called votes, and I'll put
Mhm.
that vote up. And then probably like, this is why I didn't want to say like when it actually happens, because it's like, time lag, but probably like put some kind of time limit on it. And then
Mhm.
when that time limit is up, then if it passes, then I'll basically do what I said I was gonna do.
Mhm.
But yeah, is that
So what happens if it fails? If the vote fails?
we tend to have discussion threads about these things. I'll also say that I think there's only one vote that's failed, which is I don't know what that
Mhm.
says about our system of democracy. But I'll say that regardless, we'll have a thread to where people can be like, no, I don't like that, or like, can we call
Mhm.
it this? Or like,
Mhm.
that kind
Mhm.
of thing. And
Mhm.
I'll probably just post the vote again.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So what we're electing is the initial proposal of your framing of what this is.
Yes.
I'm asking this question for very specific astrological reasons that will become clear in a moment when I cast the chart, because all of these players are going to be in this chart. The other members of the broom are going to be there. The proposal itself is going to be there. So we need to assign planets to these things, and so I need to be sure I understand what they all are. But I feel like I do. So the question that I am going to distill down is when shall you post this thing? That's what we're asking. Posted for the reception of others. So reception is a term we're going to end up using a lot. I think you'll see. So I'm feeling. Do you feel like that? Do you feel like I understand what we're electing here? Okay.
Yeah, and I guess like before we go, if it's not too much to ask, like, can I ask you a question about like I know that people throw like natal charts. I don't know if throwing a natal chart is the right way to talk about the verbing of a natal chart, but
Mm.
put together charts for non-life forms based on
Uh,
when they get
mhm.
created, right? And I would say I guess I'm curious. I don't think it changes the nature of the question from my perspective, but would it be suitable to treat this, the date that we come up with for posting this proposal also as the natal chart for this
Absolutely.
whatever it's going to be?
Yes. That is one of the foundational principles of electional astrology. That you like that it is a magical power to be able, well, it's a magical power to be able to choose and act freely in the world at all. And so to choose the nativity for something is a godlike responsibility. And that's why electional astrology is such a big deal. And that's why when my clients peace be upon them all, ask me if it's okay to be like 45 minutes late to their election, I say that's your problem. But here are the 19 time sensitive factors that went into why you cannot go later than this minute that I have sent you. Like this is you are deciding when a baby is born here. And so this is an awesome responsibility, and why electional astrology should not be done lightly, and should not be done carelessly, and should not be done without rigorous training, which thank God I've had. So yes, this will be the chart. This will be the inception chart for this thing. Although, I mean, this could take us down a rabbit hole that never gets us to looking at a chart. But the truth, this is another thing. I feel like this is more useful for some of your ongoing sort of critiques of natal astrology. The chain of dependent origination is endless. So there are beginnings to all beginnings before the beginning of the beginning, etc. So this is one chart that will be of critical importance to what this lineage space is, but it isn't the same as the chart that from the moment that you click create channel later, which will be another kind of birth, and so on and so forth. So like there is a principle. This is a good thing to say before we start doing this. There is a principle in electional astrology of rooting, and this is why a natal chart is so important for an election, because if this election for you, as the one consulting the oracle about when to take the action, doesn't express the inevitable outcome of the beginning that is your life, then it is a confused attempt. But this has a lot of knock-on effects that I think fall on like in the opposite direction from what you might expect, which is like say a person comes to an astrologer for an election and doesn't know when they were born. If the authorities whom I follow say that if the astrologer casts a chart for that moment, for that question, a question chart, and the question is, will this venture be successful? And the question chart says yes, then that implies that question chart is radical to the nativity in such a way that it can be used to root the election. Do you see what I'm saying? So you don't know the person's time of birth, but if they asked a question and the oracle shows favor on the venture, that means that the question itself was asked at an auspicious time that can then be used to root the election. So you could then time the creation of the lineage space like to the election for the vote that we're about to make. See what I mean? Or to the chart for this meeting we're having now. If all is in alignment, it should all be radical to each other.
I'm very interested in your choice of the word radical there. Can you say a little more about that?
That comes straight from the books. It means rooted. And the first place that I encountered this terminology was in studying horary texts, which in those, I think the assumption is already made that it means radical to the nativities of the people asking the questions or whatever. So you can say of a horary chart, this chart is radical if it answers the question. Or this chart is not radical if it is confused. And then those situations are some of the most interesting because there are reasons for that. And there are several considerations before judgment in the tradition that an astrologer is meant to look out for to indicate that a chart is not radical. And yet it has been my experience that when you catch those and you hesitate and you look for an explanation for why the chart is, let's say, has a 29-degree ascendant or a 0-degree ascendant, and you find a reason, that means the chart is radical. You may continue. But if you find Saturn on the ascendant, or like if you find something that says stop, you stop. That chart is not radical. And that can be done, that can be for all kinds of reasons. And I don't want to like make light of it, but I or wave it away, rather, is what I mean. But like I tend to put that on the diviner, on myself. If I get a chart that's not radical, I assume that I've come in with a cloudy head or with a bias in the question or something like that. And like, I don't just think that, like I have examples of that. The only charts I've ever gotten wrong predictively where the astrology clearly indicated to me an outcome and the outcome was different, also indicated like they showed me getting it wrong in the chart and I didn't see it because of my bias. And that's only happened once or twice.
I've read it,
but believe me, yeah, you were there for that. That was a soccer game that I was at. You weren't physically there, but when I'm at a soccer game, you're there.
Very, very good. I love that explication, and I also find it titillating when words are used very differently in current time to the etymology. It's like the debased thing, radical, yes. Radical. So good. But thank you so much for explaining, and I'm looking forward to exploring that concept a little more as we get into it.
Oh, we will. Are you ready to get into it?
I am. Yeah.
Okay, let me share my screen then.
All right.
Which I've already set to your chart. I'm trying to see if I can get the right window situation. Okay, yeah, let's do it like this.
All right.
Do we see astrology?
I see astrology.
Okay, let me see.
Yes. It's taking. Right. This is a pretty radical. I mean, I'm just fucking around. It's a psychedelic color scheme.
Yeah, well, this is my. I've spent a lot of time on these settings, and I'm very happy to talk about them if you want. I guess for the purposes of trust and transparency, I should talk about the settings. What we are looking at. This is Nobu's birth chart, which I am sharing with permission that you all heard granted. The zodiac is set to tropical, which is something that has been of some discussion amongst us all. And I'm going to go ahead and state my reason, which is that I am the astrologer making this election from the Earth perspective, and therefore am choosing the Earth perspective of the tropical zodiac rather than the galactic perspective of the sidereal zodiac. I have also chosen whole sign houses, which I don't always use for every kind of astrology, but do always use for elections. This is also a matter of perspective. And it's the opposite consideration. I use Placidus houses when I am asking a question about a local phenomenon. And you could certainly say that an election, we will need a location for the election, is a local phenomenon. And in that sense, it will be. The angles of the chart that we are electing will be local to somewhere. But whole sign houses, to me, are the planetary perspective on the Earth looking in. If you think about it as these are undistorted regions of space that are intersecting the local sky in interesting oblique ways, the precise longitudinal degrees of the signs are the point of view that's being considered. That is the temples of the planets, the 30-degree segments that each planet has energetic authority over. And there are many layers of authority, and we may have to talk about more of those. Those 30-degree segments are the outside-in point of view. The quadrant houses are the perspective from the ground, divided into 12 segments, and therefore represent the individual's perspective.
Mm.
What we're doing here is electing the birth of a being. And to me, it is the point of view of the planets on the life of that being that is most important, because we're considering the whole life. We're not considering this being from the point of view of where Nobu is sitting when he clicks the button. We're considering how the life of this whole container is going to go.
Mm.
And so for that reason, I use whole sign charts for elections and for a lot of natal work too, but not all. So those are my choices for the settings. The psychedelic part that you're seeing is probably the outer ring, which is the same colors as the signs, but not lined up. And you may be wondering what that's about. I'll have you know that is the way that the sidereal zodiac is displayed in my chart.
Mm.
Those 28 regions are the lunar stations, which I have set in accordance with my limited training in using the lunar stations from Shuli Itztagninut on social media, who is my lunar astrologer of record. I've set the lunar stations to their sidereal positions rather than their tropical positions, because the moon does her own thing. So you can see, so I'm not probably going to use that very much, but you can see where the sidereal signs are at any time that I'm working that way, if you would like. The other dignities are the traditional Hellenistic ones. And I have the lots of fortune, spirit, and eros showing. I will talk more about those if they become of use to us. And I have the outer planets Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto showing, because I believe in those. But I do not assign them dignities in the zodiac in terms of responsibilities for topics. We will see them come up in other ways. So in other words, I use traditional rulerships of houses. Any other questions about the chart?
I mean,
before we start to look.
I'll say that when the chart came up, I thought that the lot of spirit was speaker, and I was scandalized because I have speaker tattooed on my chest, and I know it to be conjunct my natal moon. I was like, what the fuck? But thank you for clarifying. The reason I don't have fixed stars showing on this chart is because I do not have a relationship with any of those beings that I feel adequate to make demands of them. If you have points that you would like me to consider, including stellar beings, please let me know if they feel relevant to you. I'm happy to turn them on. And you can make that call now. You can make that call at any time. Okay, I'm gonna percolate on that.
Okay.
I've never heard anybody talk about astrology the way that you're talking about it now, and I'm very grateful for that. But let's go.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to I'm going to put on a second chart here. For some reason, Jupiter at 20 Taurus is selected. Oh, I know what that was for a client, a transit I needed. So here are the current. Well, let's do your location. Actually, let's do it this way. What is the location, to the best of your knowledge, where you will be pressing the button?
Well, It depends on what date we come up with. I'm gonna be in Istanbul, Turkey until October 22nd, most likely. And then
Okay.
I'm gonna be in Sofia for maybe 10 days is like my sense. And then I'll be in Perth, Australia, probably stably for at least like 2 or 3 weeks. So after
Okay.
that, I'll be back in Sofia.
Here, that is too complicated for me to keep in my mind. So what we're going to do is start in Istanbul, and then
Perfect.
we will move. You will need to tell me if we need to move.
Okay.
So
That's cool.
so this is because we're going to push out. I'm going to operate. Well, actually, let me ask you first. Are there time constraints for the beginning or end of this election? Do you need it to be past a certain date, and does it need to be done by a certain date?
I would say that any more than any closer than 3 days from now is probably too soon.
Okay.
And then yeah, let's
One,
say
two,
like
three.
let, to make it let's make it simple and just say before October 22nd, I'm gonna push the button.
Okay. So I do ask this question of my clients, whether there's like a latest date. And I do so with clenched teeth every time, because so often they're going to say Friday. That they've come to me and they want an election, but they want it right now.
Right.
So it's there comes a point at which, like, if you want to do this right now, you shouldn't elect it, because like you're going to do a much worse job knowing that there was a better time to do it and not using that. But the time frame of a week or two, like, we have something to work with, to be sure. That said, there are some things to know about the current astrology. Like, Jupiter is retrograde, for example. Jupiter will not be out of retrograde until the end of the year. So, we're going to have to work with that. And now we can, don't worry. But the problem is Jupiter signifies two things in your chart. The second house of resources, which is not, I use that word because I don't want to limit it to material resources, but it's that which resources the first house, which is you. And so those conditions are the ruler of those conditions is retrograde now. There is a factor we can use to our advantage that I'll talk about. But Jupiter also rules the 11th house of networks. And that, I would say, is the significator of the broom itself here in your nativity. So now, what does it mean for that to be retrograde? Like, can the significator of the broom being retrograde, moving in retrograde, signify an important review of the structure of this body? Absolutely. It just depends how we use Jupiter in the election.
Mm-hmm.
What the house topics Jupiter rules in the election are. So we can probably work with that, but it's important to know that, like, for the rest of this year, Jupiter will be functioning in that way. And so what topics in this election does Jupiter represent? And they're important topics. So that's one thing to look out for.
That makes so much sense, Tom. I mean, like, positioning it, yeah, like the fact that it rules the 11th house of this election makes a ton of sense, because I feel like it's a very different thing to what the broom has been. So,
well, can I amend your language slightly? Because this is going to be confusing. We're going to be working with multiple sets of houses. Jupiter does not necessarily rule the 11th house of the election unless we choose an Aquarius rising chart. Jupiter rules your natal 11th house. And so it is a review or a return, all those retrograde words of 11th house topics for you. Now, the question is, how do we plug that in to the 11th house of the electional chart? Because the election's 11th house is going to signify the broom at the election.
And
So
Jupiter's in the
we
11th house for me natively, so
that's true. That's a very good observation. So, and I mean, that's another way of saying domicile Jupiter, like you have a sort of a destiny on 11th house topics. Like that's like this is a thing. It should be easy to make auspicious elections for you on 11th house matters, because your 11th house, well, it's your 11th house. It is also where the South Node is, but South Node is something we can work with too, because of the way we've already worked together on matters of lineage and inheritance and other. So we don't do Sagittarian things here without due reverence to received wisdom. We don't just go galloping off into the Wild West here. So we'll be able to work with it. Okay, so we're looking at September 29th, because I just clicked 3 days, which is what you said. And the thing we're looking for is planetary condition. We're not gonna we're looking for planetary condition in and of itself. We want planets in good condition that we can work with in the election. And just to be super clear, because I understand this is pretty advanced astrology here, when I say work with, I'm going to be choosing a rising sign, basically. That's what this the main thing I'm choosing is the rising sign. The next main thing I'm choosing is the moon sign and condition, because those are the fastest moving things. Those are the things that change every day in a significant way. So the topics, the house topics that the planets signify, is determined by where the ascendant is. So that's like literally what time of day we are making this election for. It changes everything. So what we want to do first to find a basic chart that basically makes sense, is find strong planets that we can work with primarily as the ascendant ruler, because that's Nobu making this choice, taking this action. And we want to think about 11th house rulers too, because this is an 11th house election, basically. And there are other houses that are involved, but like these are the things we need to make sure the first house and the 11th house are in harmony. Now, naturally, the first house and the 11th house are in harmony. The 11th house is a good house. That's why it's the house of friends. The 11th house is a sextile to the ascendant. It is a supportive relationship. So we should be able to make the first and 11th house work together relatively easily, but we need to find good significators for that. And the moon needs to be in good shape. This is basically all we're looking for. But the way that plays out is going to become complicated. So anyway, Mars, the ruler of the day we are doing this on for good reason, is in Libra. Traditionally, this is not a good indication, because Mars is in its antithesis in Libra as the ruler of Aries. And is applying to the South Node. Mars is weakened right now. We are doing really good remediation for Mars in this container, all of us, but right now Mars is hurting. And he's hurting all the more because he's going into domicile soon. He's moving from Libra to Scorpio. He's moving quickly, and he's done with all that awful 7 months in Gemini stuff, and he's going. So we have until October 22nd. The only change in direction that I have in my mind ephemeris anytime soon. No, there isn't one. So I mean, Saturn goes direct kind of soon, in a month, like a little month, like in November, I think. So, and of course, I'm going to check this work. But if we keep going, we can get Mars into Scorpio by October 13th. Does everyone see what I've done here? I just pushed it forward to October 13th. So we've still got, but here's some things that change. We've still got retrograde Jupiter. Venus has moved from Leo into Virgo. Now Venus is in her fall in Virgo. Do we want to do that to Venus? Given that we are making a relationship-based election, can we do it with that? maybe, but fall is an interesting dignity. It's one. This is the kind of thing that we'll have to discuss once we get dialed in. Like, so a planet in fall is like lowered in esteem. Is that something we want to do? Is that something, or is it something that would help? You know what I mean? Like it's possible that like a humbled Venus could be the key to this whole thing. So we'll just have to see. I'm just moving my Zoom window around because I realized I've moved it off of the astrology screen, and now I'm looking over here when I'm talking to you, and I don't want to do that. Here we go. So now I'm covering my essential dignity chart, but that's okay. Okay, so now we've got Mars in Scorpio. So what I want to do, given that, can I really see this horrible little scoreboard thing that we have over here? This is the table of traditional dignities, and it doesn't show everything that I am considering, but it's a good way of getting a quick read. I'm never going to do anything as horrible as like, well, Venus has 8 points and Mars has 7 points, so Venus is better than Mars. Like, I'm never going to do it like that. But what I am going to do is identify which planets are strong quickly this way. So we've got another problem, which is that the sun is in its fall in Libra. And how close do we get to Scorpio? Which is still not a great place, but it's better than that. That's October 24th, so we're past the deadline, right? This is electional astrology 101. We cannot get the sun out of fall. So we're gonna have to spin that. We're gonna have to take down the sun cult with this election. What we're probably gonna have to do, to be honest with you, is elect a night chart, so that the moon is the luminary of the sect and is the stronger.
Wow.
So that's one thing to think about. We did, not that I have provided any shortage of things to think about. We've got a very fast Mercury. We could do a Mercury Cazimi if we dial it in. It's I'll get it exact. On October 19th. And this might seem kind of silly what I'm doing here. Like, oh, look, a Mercury Cazimi, let's do that. That's not how this works. like astrology is a series of like potent moments. You want a potent moment for an election. We have the ability to choose a potent moment, which is not something that every being has at every time. It's not something every human being has at every time. But if we've got it, we're going to use it. So if we dial in an exact Mercury Cazimi, granted that it's in Libra, which is not a super great place for the sun to be, but Mercury is in good shape. Mercury is in, and this is also a remediation for Venus. Venus is in her fall in Virgo. This is because she's exalted in Pisces and she's opposite her place of Pisces. But with a strong Mercury in her sign of Libra, in Venus's sign, that is, they support each other. So that's a good reason to use this. That helps us with one of our weakened planets. We're not even talking about what this election is for yet. We're just trying to help the planets. And once we can do that to a sufficient degree that we feel like we can act in that moment, then we can start dialing for something that will support us. So let's just try this moment, because we're not going to get a direct Jupiter. We're not going to get a direct Saturn. We're close, but we're not going to get it. It's a month away. So, and we're not going to get the sun we can't even get 4 days later than this. We can't get the sun into Scorpio and out of fall because it's too late. So at this point, we've found what feels to me like the best chart we're going to get in a general sense. So except that the moon is in Capricorn, which is her exile also. So we may want to back it up. We'll see. So what I would do, but this is like, we don't have to be done yet. Like, we might find that this date is wrong, but what I want to do at this point is switch to that chart. So this is the chart for the Mercury Cazimi. And we see it as its own event in Istanbul at 8 a.m. on October 20th. Now, there's a few problems. One is that this is a day chart, and as we said, we want a stronger moon than sun because this sun is so banged up. Not that the moon is in great shape either here. We may not be able to use it for that reason alone. I can hear Kira Ryberg, my electional teacher, saying you have to take care of the moon. And you do. Because the moon, let's talk about the moon for a second. You can do, and I can hear Shuli saying you can do electional astrology just with the moon. Because the moon is the people, the moon is the body, the moon is us. If the moon is in bad shape, we're in bad shape. So and particularly for an election of a democracy, you don't want the people to be in bad shape or in dire straits or far from home. So I'm inclined against this Capricorn moon already for that reason.
It feels alive.
We only feel that feels aligned. I also see that Anna is saying that the sun in fall feels aligned.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
I mean, I was going to say that when I think of the sun, I think of a wanderer that tends to like obliterate nuance with its sense of self. And, you know, for something which relates to like, I'm going to say like a networked cooperative venture relating to science, that feels like a bad signification. Like, I mean, I would say like having the sun in fall feels aligned for me.
Yeah. It's what I would say, if we're gonna make it work, what I would say about it is the sun is unilateral. The sun signifies the unilateral. Now, the day sect in general signifies the unilateral. The difference between a day and a night chart to me, like, yes, the difference is that a different luminary is in charge, but I think that the whole sky is really what signifies the difference. Like the sun has blotted out the sky in the day, and in the night, like other galaxies are possible. So a night chart feels more like the environment into which we are launching this thing. And we don't want the sun and fall in charge of this thing. Like, forget all of that. This chart, this Mars, now this is a powerful chart. Mars and Scorpio rising in his own term and face, that's a strong Mars. Taken completely in isolation. But the problem is the midheaven, which is the visible result of this, which I might even say could signify this channel itself. But really what it signifies is its role in the world is ruled by a fallen 12th house sun. We don't want to do that to ourselves here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the hour back a bit. I want to see what we can do with the Sagittarius moon in the night chart. Because as we recall from earlier, Sagittarius is the 11th house of the native for whom we are electing. So I've just pushed it back by hour to get the moon into Sagittarius. And this is a 4th house moon, which is a pretty interesting thing. And what I also see here is Venus. And we were talking about we need Venus's help. We need to help Venus, that is. Another way to help Venus is to put her on the ascendant. So this is the exact moment. This is the kind of thing I do where I'm like, your election is for 3:29 a.m. Can I do it at 3:45? No, you cannot. Because at 3:45 a.m., Venus has fallen from the angle. So like I can give you wiggle room on the other end. I can put the ascendant earlier in Virgo if you want. But like what I tend to do in isolation is put the point that we're trying to help on the angle. Now, Venus is not the planet signifying the endeavor here. What she is the benefic of the set. She is the planet who blesses the night. And so to put her in the first house on the angle is to like put a blessing into your hands, Nobu, your hands. Though you are signified in this chart by Mercury, who is the ruler of the ascendant. And we've still got a Kazemi. I have a pretty strict Kazemi definition because I have natal Venus Kazemi privilege. But there's two. Let me talk about what Kazemi is. Kazemi means in the heart of the sun in Arabic, or maybe it's bastardized Arabic, but it comes from Arabic. And the signification, not everyone agrees on the Kazemi itself, because on either side of the Kazemi, the planet is combust, and this is a very literal signification. The planet is invisible, and because it is swallowed up by the sun, and the beams of the sun afflict a planet 15 degrees on either side, and closer. And that's like enough to make it start to be less visible. And like something like 8.5 degrees on either side, the condition is increased in seriousness and is known as combustion, because that planet is completely invisible. There's never a time of day at which a planet in that range is visible. So a planet just before or just after an exact conjunction with the sun is jacked up. But it is said in the tradition that when the sun and the planet are perfectly aligned, by some authors it is said, but I can confirm because I am one, that planet is lifted up onto the throne of the sun. And so now, is the Libra sun a throne you want to be, with the South Node, a throne you want to be lifted up on? Like the eclipse that we just had right over there, that this chart is right after, like is that really where you want to be? But like, Nobu, you're an exorcist. I think that if someone has to go there, it could be you. But I'm going to talk about it some more. I'm going to talk about some more things we're doing to take care of this. First of all, the Kazemi is, so I didn't say what the definitions are. Some authors say that the Kazemi is within the same degree partile. Like if it was at 26 anything Libra, it would be Kazemi. The stricter definition, which I love because I have it and I'm a spoiled brat Kazemi wise, is 17 arc minutes of distance, which is that sounds arbitrary, but what it is the apparent size of the disk of the sun in the sky. So like if you could look at them without the glare, you would see like the circle of the sun, and the planet would be inside of the circle.
Wow.
And that's a very, very short transit, but we've got it. It's 9 arc minutes.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that seems really auspicious to me because I don't know, at least by like born day numbering systems, 3 is a Mercury number. So 333 as a code name for this, lineage. Native
nice.
in Mercury Kazemi seems pretty juicy.
Yes. Okay. So let's have a working election here. Well, I want to cover the whole chart, make sure we didn't miss anything, and then we're going to flip back on Nobu's chart and look at it as transits and see how that works. So, so the other thing I was going to say is, so Nobu, like sitting on the throne of the fallen sun and going into the past karma wormhole of the South Node just after an eclipse, like I wouldn't wish that on a lot of people. I wouldn't wish it on you, but I know that you're capable of it. And there's also more that this chart does for you here. I was talking before about the mutual reception between Venus and Mercury, because again, Mercury is in Venus's sign, and Venus is in Mercury's sign. That's called mutual reception. They don't have an aspect with each other because they're in adjacent signs, and that would be a better arrangement if they could see each other. They could help each other.
Mm.
And so they can't see each other, but but they love each other.
Mm-hmm.
And that counts for something.
Mm-hmm.
So you, as the ruler of Virgo in this chart, have this Venus gift upon you on the angle to bless you in this venture, though it may be rough going. See what I'm saying?
Yes. It all feels
So
very aligned for me.
good. So what else do we have? We have a super strong Mars, but he's not doing a whole lot. Now that could be good. It could, though, be something we have to do differently given this Mars Day container and what the significance of martial strength might be for this effort.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the third house is a pretty good chat room community space. Like I would say the distinction is the 11th house signifies the individuals who are in this thing as its supporters.
Hmm.
To me, the third house feels like the place,
Hmm.
the discord itself here, the neighborhood in which this takes place. So the ruler is at home. He's quite comfortable. He's in sect, which means he's not the nasty version of himself. And that feels like a support for the structure.
Hmm.
Now, he's also the 8th house ruler, which let's leave him there for now. We'll see when we flip your natal chart back on. We're going to see really what everybody represents. Mercury also signifies the midheaven, and that is a pretty interesting thing to do. However, what I would say is that it takes the public side of this venture and puts it down here in the it sort of is a good signification for privacy of this venture, given especially sort of Mercury's invisibility, like literal in the sky invisibility, give the proximity to the sun. But it also, it's not without its sort of worldly value, because it's a strong Mercury in the second house. So it's like making it into a resource. All of this stuff represents the resources of this venture. And I'm not going to say that they're going to come easily, but they are, like, the visible nature of what you are creating can be transmuted into a resource here. And its ruler is on the ascendant as a blessing. It's like, this is a very alchemical process. It's not going to happen naturally. It's going to require work, but it has a process that we can see that doesn't look like a disaster of any kind. Jupiter, retrograde Jupiter, your natal 11th house significator. We're going to look at your natal chart in a second, but I'm just making sure we're not missing anything stupid, right? We haven't talked about the moon either. Jupiter rules the 4th house and the 7th house of this chart. These are very important houses that may be obvious. These are the 4th house is the home and the 7th house is the other. So those could signify all kinds of things, but what we're doing with this chart is putting them in the 9th house of spirituality, God, of knowledge, wisdom. Like we're it looks like turning this into a, well, shul is what you have called it. We're turning the home into a temple. So that feels good. The moon. So the moon is about to go into her exile. Another time-sensitive factor in this election. So we can push it back, but then we lose the glorious numerology of this Kazemi, so we might not want to do that. But like if we did it by a day, well, no, then Mercury would just be fucked. We couldn't use a Virgo rising chart if we did that. So so the moon is applying to Saturn is really the concern.
Mm.
Traditionally, that isn't something you would want to do.
Mm.
And that's because, and Saturn is out of sect here. Saturn is the bad of this chart, and is retrograde. Like it's a scary Saturn. So if we're going to use this chart, we got to talk about what it is. And honestly, this is the first thing I've looked at where I've been like, I don't know if we can use this.
Mm-hmm.
For a few reasons. Not the moon represents all the things she represents that I talked about, but she also is the 11th house ruler of this chart. She's the people of the broom. And she's about to run into the Saturn wall here.
Mm.
And she's ruled by Jupiter, who's retrograde. So it's like what this could look like. One way of looking at it. I am not trying to determine this and fix this as a way of understanding this moon. But one way it could look is like a lofty idea running into reality.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit more about Saturn's condition. Saturn is in his own face. So he's got like the teeniest bit of dignity, which is good. Like it's the thing that makes his point. But what does he signify? He signifies the 5th house and the 6th house of this chart. The 5th house is a good house. The 5th house is creativity, creation, the creation of this thing. Like the moon making contact with the ruler of the 5th house is a radical description of being born, or pregnancy even.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, what sort of pregnancy? What sort of thing will we be pregnant with?
Mm.
And another thing that Saturn signifies is the 6th house, which is the grind, the hard work of making this happen. So I think what I want to do is hear how that moon Saturn sextile with a loss of dignity sounds to you as a moment, feels to you. Yeah. This is the kind of thing we've always done. This is just like a thing happening in the sky. I want to know how it feels to you. And then if it feels like we can continue, we'll check it out as transits and see what it means for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I will say like it chilled me a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like the idea, like the formulation that you came up with, like a lofty idea running into reality, is often something that I feel in regard to this idea overall. So, and I mean, I would say that's like been happening ever since it came to me the first time. And I also understand that perhaps having lofty ideas run into reality is exactly the kind of experience I need. So that's pretty much like how it feels. Like I wouldn't say it's necessarily something that I would avoid. And I feel like maybe this is a little controversial when it comes to, say, like electional astrology or just like spiritual practice in general. But I feel like some of the things I value the most have come from really difficult lessons.
Yeah.
And I kind of like have this faith that, like, you know, say we do go ahead with this election and, you know, without having determined it, what you formulated ends up coming true and a lofty idea runs into reality. I have this faith that, like, whatever comes of that will be made into something very, like, expansive.
I'm cowboy emoji reacting to what you're saying. because like that's a very Sagittarius moon attitude also, right? Like let's take all of these characters in context. Like, yeah, Saturn in Pisces is over there, like this like whale skeleton, like glowing green is like but this moon is like, woo, let's do it anyway. So like here's what I will say. I wouldn't give this chart to a client who was trusting me to elect something for them that would go smoothly.
Right.
I still may not give it to you.
Yes.
but I have done enough. We have done enough work together. I think this is the most important thing we could possibly do in here, to be honest with you. I've worked with you enough to know that you know what I mean when I tell you that this is what this signifies, and that like, even if I wouldn't do it myself, I wouldn't feel. Now, taking this chart in isolation, haven't looked at your nativity yet. I wouldn't feel like you were making a mistake if you told me you wanted to learn that lesson and we're gonna go for it. But I'm only talking about one chart. So if you want to go ahead, let's put your natal chart back on and see how it looks.
My body says yes. Let's do it.
Here we are.
Okay.
Now this has already gotten super interesting. We have, because I knew you were a Virgo sun, according to tropical astrology, and I was thinking about that, but the Sagittarius part was what I was interested in, because that's the moon and that's the 11th house. And the IC of the chart of the election here in early Sagittarius, a very active place in your chart, with applying Jupiter-Uranus conjunction.
Wow.
which I think is radical. You know, I think that still describes what we're doing here. Now, I wasn't thinking about the fact that Scorpio is your 10th, and you have the midheaven in the 9th, and so this is a thing. This is one of the interesting things about working with whole sign charts, which is that you can have the midheaven and IC. I always want to use the word displaced. But the translation that is usually used, I don't even know whether this is like Greek or Latin or Arabic or what, but the English that people use to translate this condition is usually remote. The angle is remote. So what I mean by that is it's remote from the 10th and 4th. The midheaven is remote from the 10th and 4th, and you don't have that in a quadrant chart because the 10th house cusp is defined by the midheaven. So what it ends up doing, it follows the same principle of any kind of like rulership, where you know the planet who rules a house being in a different house means that planet brings the topics of the house it rules into the house that it's in. The midheaven works the same way. So the 10th house does describe your natal 10th house, that is, does describe your visible role in the world, but the midheaven describes your specific. Let me phrase that a little more clearly. The 10th house describes your visible nature, the things that are visible about you, but the midheaven is the point that actually describes your specific role. And yours is in the 9th house rather than in the 10th. So it's like your role. I'm just doing like very basic natal astrology that somebody could probably actually take issue with, but that's not what we're actually here to do. The midheaven in the 9th, is a simple way of putting it is your role is more of a 9th house role than a 10th house role, which is to say more of a priestly role than a executive role.
Perfect.
Or something like that. So Now that said, so that's Libra, and we've got a lot going on in Libra that's very close to the midheaven. That whole thing we talked about with the Venus Cazimi, with the Mercury Cazimi and the fallen sun, and you doing the thing. Like, I regret to inform you, as much as this is the scary part, your like Pluto MC situation is right there. This is like telling you that you have to go. So we're gonna need to face the fact that this fallen sun underworld past life karma thing is happening here. But that isn't actually what I wanted to go into here. What I want to go into is this Mars in the 10th. So like you have this super dignified Mars transiting your 10th house. And what I was saying before, when it was just the election chart itself, is that I wasn't quite sure how the third house used this Mars. Like it's a good thing to have like a strong third house ruler in the third when what you're creating is a neighborhood space, right? But how is that going to play out in your nativity? And it turns out super intensely. Like, first of all, Mars rules your natal third house, which is where your IC is. So like you have a thing about the home being in the third house out in the community rather than like in the domicile. But also the election's third being your 10th is a very radical way of saying like creating this space is your job. And that like it's time to do your job here. Like the ruler of it is here.
I was like, am I gonna do some work or like, yeah.
Yeah, you are, it looks like.
I can't fucking do
it. Good. I'm glad. So like this is all working out so far. And we still need to look harder at the moon. Because like, is it going to work is not a foregone conclusion. That's why I wouldn't give it to a client, because them learning a hard, like coming into something with a great idea and learning a hard lesson about it, for most electional astrology cases, that is not a success. Right? Like that's like literally what you're trying not to do to the person. But like if trying it anyway and learning a lesson is what you're trying to have happen, let's go. But the way it plays out is something we need to take a look at. But just to finish up sort of everything else before we talk about the moon, Venus in Virgo is really good for you. I'm not worried about that. Like your sun, your 8th house sun, getting blessed here, being on the ascendant, the 8th house being sort of the place of other people's business, other people's stuff, like Mercury being there. I feel like this whole 9th house, 8th house situation does beautifully describe what it is we're trying to do and sort of completes the other end of the work. Like your sun is here. There's something very mutual about these two houses. The 9th house signifying the idea, if you will, the temple of what this is, and the 8th house representing maybe the dark matter, like the stuff under the surface that needs to be brought up by this. Like your sun is there. You're here for this. You're here for this work, as hard as it might be. So I'm not worried about anything else, but I'm still worried about the moon. It is going to reach the sun before it hits Saturn. Yeah, I guess I should have observed that. Like its next aspect is not Saturn. Its next aspect is the sun, which is good. Actually, here its next aspect is Mercury. We could move it by 1 arc minute and get it past Mercury. But actually that's worth considering. I should have caught that, because the timing, we like this Cazimi timing because of its numerological resonance. I don't want to say that like I mean that it's some sort of symbolic thing. Like the fact that putting it here gives us that is resonant. But another thing it gives us is the moon applying to Mercury, and then the sun, and then Saturn. So there's 2 ways of looking at this. One way of looking at it, which is probably the responsible way of looking at it, is that yes, the moon is going to make an aspect of Mercury into the sun, and then it's going to go into its exile and hit the retrograde Saturn. So like, don't get too excited about what's going to happen in the next like 4 hours, because in the same day, it's still going to make it to Saturn. However, in the kind of symbolic timing that you use in things like this, in charts that are not real-time transit charts, but are charts that symbolize something, like the whole life of this container.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always appropriate to use real-time events to time what happens when a lot of stuff happens in a very short amount of linear time. Let me explain what I mean a little more in terms of a horary chart. If this were a question chart, if you asked me, if I were with you in Istanbul and you asked me on October 20th at 3:29 in the morning, which I guess is not out of the question if I were with you in Istanbul, should I do this right now? And I cast this chart, I would probably be forced to say the moon hits Mercury and the sun before it gets to Saturn. So when you do this thing, a Mercury thing happens, and then a sun thing happens, and then the Saturn thing happens. And the Saturn thing could be, and then there are ways to use horary to time it. It's not like we can decide arbitrarily how long it will be before each of these things happens, but we could time it that way, and we might see this container that you're creating is going to do its work and then be temporary. And when it reaches Saturn, it is over. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think this aligns with the way that I think, let's say, like an etheric snapshot works for a native chart. It's like a space and time which is as close to any other space and time as it is to the one a moment afterwards.
Yes, exactly. And this is why horary astrology works. Because what it is, if every astrological chart is a birth of something, then what a horary chart is the birth of a gnosis. Right? Like it's not the chart for the thing that happens. It's the chart for like the astrologer's epiphany about the universe. And so the snapshot matters tremendously. That's why there are considerations before judgment. If the ascendant is in the wrong place for the question, then like that person was not ready to receive that gnosis. But if you are, and two events happen before the bad one in that gnosis about what's meant to happen, then maybe it's okay. I'm blending branches of astrology together in a way that may not be totally appropriate, but there are other ways we could, we can if this is what you want to do now, we can look at the timing of these events, these moon transits, and what timing they represent. We can look at them the way we would in a horary, which is a weird little rule of thumb about like how many degrees. Hold on a second. I've been making a mistake this entire time. The moon is past Mercury and the sun. I don't even know what happened in my brain for me to look at 29 and 26 and go 29 comes before 26.
It feels very
feels what?
It feels very mercurial to me.
Yeah, for sure. It's almost like it's trying to make me do it anyway. But I was right when I was looking at the chart by itself. The next aspect of this moon makes us to Saturn. The moon has already made the aspect with Mercury and the sun. Now, is the thing that I just received a sign that we should move the moon backwards to 26 by moving the chart earlier?
It feels that way to me. I'm curious to hear. I mean, this is a very ironic thing to say, but I'm curious what it feels like for people in the chat.
Yeah, sure. And I just want to say, while you're sort of preparing your answers or typing them in, this is the kind of thing that happens to me 100 times. This is not like something that I'm embarrassed by, like this is the kind of shit that happens every 10 minutes while you're doing this. I'm just doing it in front of you. Like I wouldn't have ever said that to a client because I check everything before I send it to them. But since I'm delineating this chart on this streaming video, like I didn't have time to do that. So, but I absolutely would use that mistake in exactly this way. I would totally go, oh my God, why did I think that? It must be because I'm supposed to do that. Like we're talking about doing. But I want to see, so Jess wants me to do it.
Yeah.
And we are gonna get, I'm gonna bet you that this is enough time that we're gonna lose our 17-minute Kazemi, but I don't care. Let's do it anyway. Okay, so I'm gonna do it. It's gonna take an hour or two. Yeah. Or 3 or 4. Yeah, so we're now, we lose the partile Kazemi. We're gonna get the moon on the descendant. Yeah.
Interesting.
Not quite there yet, but that's pretty interesting. Okay, so this is now the exact moon Mercury sextile. Let me make sure it's not too far. This is hilariously precise. Yeah, okay. So now we've got a 7th house moon, and we have a Gemini rising chart, and we have Saturn on the midheaven. So this is a very interesting choice. We are still in a night chart. Mars is rejoicing in the 6th house now. Mars likes it there. So now we've taken it from being the Mars being in the 3rd house of the community container to being in the 6th house of the grind itself. So having a Mars and Scorpio in the 6th house, that's very good for the grind. That means that you will have the martial, and Mars rules the 11th now. So this is the whole community doing the grind together now. So that's good. The question we have to ask ourselves now is Mercury too damaged to continue? Because Mercury is still your significator, but it's still within a degree, but it's like, we can look at the sky. Do you want to look at the actual sky and see what it looks like?
Let's do it.
Let me see if I can. This is really stretching the sort of known boundaries of what I'm capable of doing on a live call here. So let's see.
Let's look at the sky.
Let's look at the sky. This is an iPad app, so I have to do a few very stupid things. October, like scroll this little wheel instead of type. 9:23 p.m. Location, Istanbul, Turkey. Now this is going to be underground, of course. So we're going to look down.
Is the time changing?
Oh wait, I have the wrong year. See, this is why it's so stupid. I did October 2019 instead of October 19th. October 19th. There we go. And no, this is local time. Oh wait, it did change, didn't it? Okay. So select time. 9:21, right? That's how they do it over there. 21:23. This is really, oh my God. I'm sorry. This is the date wheel. This is such great television. I can't believe it. 21. Oh, this isn't even military time. 9:23 p.m. Okay. Now where the hell are we? Okay. There we go.
Oh wow, the sun's very close to speaker too. Oof.
Yeah. So this orange line is the ecliptic. And so my strict definition of Kazemi, it's not my definition, my God. It's the strict definition of a Kazemi is basically, if I could draw lines on the screen, it would be easier to show you. Like, it's within the diameter of this white sphere of the sun along this ecliptic plane.
Right. Like at a normal.
And so
the ecliptic, basically. Like
Yeah, like so the zodiac measures this line as though it is a
Mhm.
flat plane. And
Mhm.
so 17 minutes on either side is this length.
Mhm.
And so as you can see it even from here, we're outside of that
Hmm.
and we're in the danger zone.
Mhm.
Now I'm interested in something that I'm going to check, and I'll tell you what it is in a second. No, I was looking to see whether the declination of Mercury puts it out of bounds uh, latitudinally,
Mhm.
but it's not. It's too close. Like so, if it were out of bounds, what that means is it's higher or lower
Mhm.
than a certain range, which one could argue gets it out of the 17-minute
Mhm.
zone. Uh, but I'm not sure we can use that excuse. Um, so there's the sun in all its glory.
Um,
How does this strike you?
I mean, if I'm eyeballing, like I'm drawing a line at a 90-degree angle to the ecliptic there, I feel like Mercury is going to be on the left side of that line, but I'm just eyeballing it.
No, it's for sure not.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
17 minutes is a real measurement. Like it's
Yeah.
it's 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 combust. Mercury is combust. There's no way around that.
Right.
So here's the point. Here's what I would say. We are not going to get Mercury out of that condition.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have enough time. Um, we could go like a week and a half back from that,
Mm-hmm.
and we might. We'll lose Mars, and Mars will be in that house if we do that.
Mm.
Um, so, the next like moon thing that I would want to use would be Moon Jupiter conjunction in Taurus.
Mm-hmm.
Are you willing to see how many days from now that is to see if we can fix the problem with the moon, even
Yeah,
if it takes us to a different location?
that sounds good. That
Because
sounds
like I just okay. If that sounds good, let's do it. Like we like. I don't want to. I don't want to. I want to be able to finish this in our time container if we can. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Just because I don't want you to be signified by a combust Mercury, man. I don't want that for you. So I'm going to push this ahead.
Okay.
Why did I go immediately to Taurus? It's not just because of Jupiter. It's also because of the moon's exaltation. Like it's sort of a cheat code
Mm.
to put the moon in Taurus or in Cancer
Mm-hmm.
because that's where she likes to be.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, the exact that's past the descendant. We don't want to do that. But wow, is this a crazy chart? Look at that. So everybody's in better shape. Oh, the sun's out of Libra also.
Mm.
So we're getting into super Martial territory now, and that feels appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to change the location, right? For
Yeah,
October 29th.
it'll be Sofia at this point.
Sofia,
That's
Bulgaria.
which actually feels pretty good.
Okay, that's good to know too. I mean, like that's so. This is exactly like I would want to know that too. You know, like that, like whether the person wants to do it from there,
Mm-hmm.
is just as important as any of the
Mm-hmm.
astrology. Like, I don't want you to do something you don't feel like doing. So, okay, so we've got a real doozy here of oppositions and conjunctions. uh, and yeah, so what I was saying at the beginning about the Mercury Casimi, which is how we got into that rabbit hole, was that astrology is a series of potent moments,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we had found one, and so we tried to use it, and we almost did, but we couldn't. And this is the discernment that this act requires because you're gonna want to be done with this. This is a very painstaking process. And when you find something that looks pretty good, you're going to want to YOLO it on out there. And people do all the time. They sell those elections to people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to do that to you. I'm going to push the moon into the next possible configuration for our purposes. And what I find is an extremely potent moment a few days later. So let's roll this back because we don't want this 6th house, 12th house situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's Mars Day, and we have a Mercury Mars conjunction. And we have pretty good distance between Mercury and Mars that would let me feel comfortable using this. Although, do we still want a night chart with the moon being as strong as she is? So we don't really have, okay, this is a cool thing to dive deep on. Sect, for those who don't know, is a pretty fundamental component of traditional astrology that seems pretty intuitive to me. So I'm not really sure, to be honest with you, why it wasn't considered a big deal by modern astrologers. But whether the chart is day or night, like, makes a big difference because it determines which luminaries and benefics and malefics are sort of more active, are with or are contrary to their nature. But it makes all the, I mean, day and night, it makes a huge difference to beings on Earth, whether it's day or night. Like, what more could you say about it? So I think that one of the most interesting things about the doctrine of sect is what happens at twilight. Like, night and day is not a binary proposition. So, and this varies by location and time of year. But like, how many minutes of clock before sunrise can we actually get this ascendant and will that count as a night chart? So like 7 o'clock on the dot, close enough, is sunrise that day. At 6:32, the ascendant is in Libra and the moon is in the 8th house, which we do not want. So we've got like a 30-minute window, less than 30-minute window before the sun comes up. Is it daytime 30 minutes before the sun comes up? Or is it nighttime? It's a subjective question. And there's an argument that it's nighttime. And that the definition, astrological definition of daytime is the sun has passed the ascendant. Which we could go with. Or we could go with the fact that the sun is the most angular planet here. So even though the sun isn't the luminary, or even if the sun isn't the luminary of the sect and the moon is, the sun is the omen. The sun in Scorpio is the next thing that happens here, the rising of the sun. It's past the full moon, which was an eclipse. So I'm glad that's over. But it was that night, like, this is a very potent moment. But the moon's next aspect is with Jupiter. Like, that's a beautiful thing in your nativity and in this chart. In this chart, a Scorpio rising chart, Jupiter rules the 2nd house of resources and the 5th house of creations. That's a beautiful thing for the moon to do next after an eclipse. It's like taking a bath after something like that. So I'm liking this. The sun rules the midheaven. So that's a good thing to have coming up. Like it's becoming a visible going concern, but it isn't yet. There's something very satisfying to me about the fact that this is an election for a vote on the thing that is coming.
Mm-hmm. Thinking
because the sun is coming,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, Mercury still combust.
Mm.
Mercury signifies the 11th house here,
Mm-hmm.
which is a house we've been using to signify the network.
Mm-hmm.
Mercury, though, also signifies the 8th house, which could be bad stuff that we want to be invisible.
Mm-hmm.
Starting to lose my voice here. There's this we cannot overlook this conjunction, this Mercury Mars conjunction.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very serious thing to have happening in the first house. But it's working pretty well otherwise. So the question is, what do we get from a Mercury Mars conjunction in this election of opposite Jupiter and the moon?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of tension to hold.
Mm-hmm.
Mercury, though, signifies you
Mm-hmm.
here and the work, the grind.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, did I say Mercury? Mars is what signifies you,
Mm.
the ascendant ruler.
Mm-hmm.
And so Mercury applying now, the Lord of the 8th applying to the Lord of the 1st is kind of dark. That's kind of what a you're going to die signature would look like. So we don't necessarily want that. But Mars is way stronger. So it's like that doesn't necessarily that's not automatically what that means.
Mm-hmm.
Mercury could mean any number of 8th house things. A lot of Eros is in the 8th house. So it's like something so it's arguable that something you want is signified by that Mercury.
Mm-hmm.
And it could just be another way the Oracle is showing. This is another good thing for us to talk about in here. It could be another way that the Oracle is showing the same thing as that other scary configuration with Mercury showed, still happening with some adjustment. But more importantly than that, Mercury signifies the network. Like, yes, Mercury signifies the 8th house, but like Venus is in the 8th. I'm sorry, Venus is in the 11th. We cannot overlook the obvious signification of the people you are asking for their vote applying to you. So, is there a tension here? Yes. Votes are tense moments. Tension is a keyword for an opposition. That's why I'm saying that. So it feels tense, but it feels potent and it feels descriptive to me. Do you have any reactions to this chart before we switch back to see if we can make it work?
It feels more balanced. The other one felt a little more like a YOLO, and this one kind of feels more like a discernment booster.
Yeah, for sure. It's like so here's why I agree with you, put in astrological terms. It is a tense arrangement with all these oppositions, which is a way of saying balanced, like evenly balanced. But the most interesting thing about it, I think, is that there are very dignified planets on both sides of the balance. You know, it's not like dominated by this conjunction with the sun and fall, which was on the south node, which is a very lopsided situation. It's like strong Mars in the 1st and glorious moon in the 7th. Like that is a balanced situation. It's a tense one, but it's a balanced one. So we have enough time to make this happen if the gods will it. So let's take a look. This one has a very interesting relationship to your natal chart in terms of angles, with angles in the same decan as your ascendant and descendant. Which is an interesting way, putting your natal first house on the ice in the fourth is pretty interesting. That's like you putting yourself underneath something, supporting it. And the seventh, likewise, the seventh house being in the 10th is like others, which you have a busy seventh house with planets that are both involved in this election. Putting others at the top, which also, again, it feels descriptive, but it's like, is it auspicious? That's the question. The angular Moon Jupiter conjunction is in the fourth, in your natal fourth. That's a very, very deep blessing for you in terms of like your root here. We still have this Venus Sun situation, like healing of your eighth house dark stuff. Like, we don't have time to delineate Nobu's eighth house on this show. But now what we've got is all of this in the 10th, natal 10th, which is the first. Like this is another really interesting way that this election manifests as a transit for you, because it's in your 10th house. It's in your 10th house of visibility. And so let's look at topics really quick. Mercury signifies your natal fifth house, your own creations. Coming from this eighth house dark place, which again is being blessed. Like that's who Mercury is for you. Mars, we've talked about already, as being the ruler of your 10th, the sort of significator of your career, if you will, for lack of a better word. And community as the third house, but also remembering that this is the grind. That's who the moon is for you. The Cancer is your natal sixth house. Like there are still these significations of this being a lot of work. But it's noon in your nativity at this chart. It's like, it's such an interesting thing. Like we were talking about, this is the last thing I want to say. Now I want to sort of turn it over to you to see if we found it or not. We were talking at one point about, or I was talking at one point about day versus night, right? Like the day not being the signification we wanted because it's unilateral, whereas the night is multipolar. It's got the whole cosmos in it. What this election allows us to do is make night in real time into a sort of transit day for you, where for you, you're making a decision with like outside world importance, at the very 10th house decision, but you're not making it at a time where the sun is in the 10th house blotting everything out. And so for an election of a thing that like involves one's work, I would want the most powerful event to be taking place in the 10th house. But what we have here is a balanced election, a 10th house and 4th house election, where there are things being put into the world which are going to be dynamic and difficult and productive and involve conflict and resolution and points of view. But we're getting it with grounded, rooted, supportive, embodied resources for it. So I leave it with you to respond to how this timing feels. And if we found it, thank God.
I mean, I think like symbolically situating this in Sophia and then also like the process of finding it situated in Sophia feels right to me. I mean, Sophia is a word which relates to wisdom, and I would say going further, like deeper into like the etymology, I'd say it relates to cleverness. And I feel like that's very auspicious when it relates to a lineage space involved in, I want to say, establishing wisdom against something which feels overbearing and a little hostile to change. And yeah, I think like, I mean, I think even like the tone of this container shifted with that shift. And it feels like a shift which is healthy for the kind of endeavor that we're talking about. Something which is a little more measured, something which has the blessing of the moon. I I had trouble like putting these things into astrological terms, but like what you said about a blessing of groundedness, and I want to say like home. Um, so I'd say it feels better. Like in some sense, like the broom is a place where like a lot of like wild and synchronistic and psychedelic things happen. And if there is going to be something which relates to, you know, producing, yeah, like producing a service for a vaster audience, I think that the sobering effect of this container, which is kind of contained in this election, feels right to me. And yeah, how does that sit with you?
It sits well enough for me.
I don't know. Somebody froze.
Disclaimer.
Okay, go on.
I am turning this over to you, knowing how discerning you are in the use of time and energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say that like this is not this election does not satisfy all of the conditions I would use for a client, but that's because you're not my client. You're like, that's not the relationship that we have, and I don't think that that's the relationship that every bit of astrological magic should be conducted in. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we use these things to help one another do our work, and this is something I offer to you and leave outside of your field, as you've done for me so many times, because I know that we are that this is an ongoing, this is not the birth, this is not the beginning or the end of anything. This is like a gift to further your practice that I know will come back to me and is already repaying things that have come to me. And I the most important thing that an election provides is like the blessing to go forth with the thing, and that's what I'm offering you. And so when someone engages my services and entrusts me to do all of the energy work for them on a moment that they are electing, I'm going to spend more time than we even had today to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to produce something airtight.
Mm-hmm.
But and I mean, given whatever time constraints we have to do the election in, which you did have, like we couldn't look into 2024 for this election to find like the most beautiful chart in the universe. And that's going to be the way it is. But the most important thing I want to say is that this is an ongoing practice between you and me, and between me and many other people, and like this is the minimum amount of attention and discernment that I would ever give to something like this. And it's, as I hope everybody has seen, it is quite a great deal of attention and care and detail and mistakes and corrections and all of that. And like I would never want anyone to get anything less than that,
Hmm.
because the work of spiritual support for other people is vast, interminably vast, and requires much effort and sacrifice and not doing. So I hope this has been a satisfying demonstration.
I mean, I'm incredibly satisfied. I'm in awe of the processing speed and the amount of astrological lore that you've absorbed and communicated to us all. I won't say that like I feel like we have time for like people to chime in, and I want to like be respectful to everybody's time, but I'm sure the discussion will continue, and between you and I, between like the people who are in this container and the people who view this recording. So I'll just say thank you. I'm immensely grateful for your work. I think what you said about this continued collaboration has been echoing backwards and forwards for a very long time, and I look forward to seeing how this collaboration continues. Thank you everybody for joining, and I'm gonna end the meeting. How does that feel for you, Tal?
I'm very grateful to have been here. I'm very grateful to have been witnessed practicing this practice for the first time. And may it be the beginning of a great many things, not the least of which is this venture, which I bless you all, that you have great success and learn great lessons from.
Ashe. Peace. Take care, y'all.